Now, Poland has officially assumed the presidency of the Council of the European Union during a period of immense geopolitical and economic challenges. From January to June of 2025, Poland's presidency will focus on Security Europe, a strategic agenda centered on strengthening European security across several critical dimensions, including defense, border protection, energy transition, and health. Poland's leadership also coincides with the 20th anniversary of its EU membership. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this vital leadership role is Ignacy Niemczycki, State Secretary, Polish Prime Minister's Office. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
So during this ceremony, the Prime Minister Tusk says that, and I quote, "Let's do everything so that Europe and Poland do not have to pay the highest price for freedom." What specific sacrifices or commitment is this call of action implying?
Well, I think it's quite clear that the Prime Minister was referring to the situation in Ukraine and the price that Ukrainians have to pay for freedom. And it's a call for action here in Europe, in the European Union, that we need to take the situation seriously. And the stronger we are, the less risk is for us that we will have to pay the highest price. So it's really a call for action for the next 6 months. And it's quite clear with the motto of the presidency, Security Europe, that we need to focus on security and that we need to be serious about it.
Right, and I think the same sentiment was made when Tusk also mentioned that if Europe is powerless, it will not survive. So with that out of the way, what kind of concrete steps are we anticipating this Polish leadership will bring?
Absolutely. So I think the Prime Minister was obviously mentioning security, and when we think security, we mean the hard security, usually defense. But it's also about the economic power of the EU. So as you very well know, the EU and its soft power has been a model in the world. But in recent years, we've seen that the competitiveness of European economy has been going down, and we have to work on that as well. If we are to be competitive with China, if we are to be competitive with the US, we really need to step up. And having a stronger economy also puts us in a better position when we have to deal with countries like Russia. So during our presidency, we'll focus on security, but in a broad sense. So not only defense, but as I said, also economic security, energy security, security of the borders, information security. So how do we deal with disinformation? How do we deal with external manipulation in the social media? But also health security and food security.
Right. And speaking of the United States, with Donald Trump returning to the U.S. presidency, how does Poland plan to adapt its EU presidency to sort of leverage opportunities for transatlantic cooperation?
Well, first of all, we need to make it clear that transatlantic relationship is vital for both the EU and the US. And we are very open to working with our US partners, with the new US administration. So we want to take a proactive role. We need to better understand what is the situation in the US, what are the expectations of the new US administration, so that we can positively respond to them. We don't want to enter a trade war with US. That would be the last thing that we want. This would make both Europe but also the US weaker, and we don't want that given the situation that we have in Ukraine. So again, I think our role as the presidency is to be proactive, but also positive with the new US administration.
Do you see any challenges going ahead? Because we do know that Poland, being the president of the EU Council presidency, is going to have to uphold the European value. But then we also see Trump with a more kind of unilateral approach towards things. Do you think the two might butt heads a little bit?
Well, I think it's quite obvious that some member states will try and get a deal with the new US administration. And it's also the great expectation towards the Polish presidency is that we'll ensure unity of the whole EU. But at the same time, we need to remember that especially here in Poland, but I would say in our region, we are more dependent on the US when it comes to security than some other member states. But we also expect those other member states to understand this situation here in Poland. So I think this will be a challenge, definitely, but holding the presidency itself is challenging.
Definitely so. And another thing that I'm seeing that Poland will have to juggle is its energy independence and in relation to the green energy transition. How do you think Poland might be able to kind of balance that going forward, having still trying to be competitive, still be energy independent, but also not just throwing the green agenda on the wayside?
Yeah, so the focus here is very much on energy prices. And I think the Prime Minister has mentioned it in his speech yesterday. So we want to go ahead with the green transition. It's quite clear that the climate catastrophe is coming, and it affects a lot of our citizens here in Poland, but all over Europe, all over the world. But at the same time, we need to ensure that our economy is competitive with other countries like China, countries like US. So the focus here will be on energy prices, and there's no easy solution. I'm not going to say that we'll fix it during the 6 months, but I think we'll be having important discussions during this period that may lead in a medium term to some concrete solutions.
Right. And I think this kind of open approach actually brings more confidence, kind of facing the problem as it comes. And one of the other things that's on my mind is also the agricultural aspect, because this is also one of the 7 focuses going into the Polish presidency with these agricultural issues with the farmers protesting. What do you think are the disconnect between what Poland's trying to do, what the EU is trying to do, and the farmers' grievances?
But I don't think farmers right now are sure of the future in the EU. So on one hand, we do have a common agricultural policy, but on the other, we enter into negotiations and we finalize those negotiations with other countries around the world on free trade agreements like the Mercosur agreement. And those are controversial in that they might adversely affect farmers. Given all that, farmers are not really sure about the future in the European Union. So I'm very happy to see that the European Commission is taking this seriously, and it will be presenting its vision for agriculture, for European agriculture during the Polish presidency. So again, we'll be having this very serious discussion about the future of agriculture, and we want to emphasize that the agriculture is key to our food security. So when we discuss security, we cannot forget about food security as well.
And another one of the topics on the agenda is also focusing on combating misinformation. I think this is something that has, been repeatedly brought onto the table ever since Russian invasion of Ukraine began. What are some of the specific steps that we can see the Polish taking to tackle this issue?
So first of all, I would say it's a broader subject than just disinformation. It's really about democratic resilience. So when we speak about disinformation, we usually think of social media, we think of algorithms, AI. But I think it's also about education, it's about media literacy, it's about culture. And during the Polish presidency, we actually want to take this broad approach and have an agreement around the table that fighting disinformation shouldn't only focus on working with social media platforms, but we should also invest in education, we should also invest in civil society organizations. But obviously we do have to work with social media platforms to limit the scope of disinformation as well.
All right, and last but not least, what can we look forward to for this next 6 months?
Well, I'm mostly excited about the economy security, and I think we'll be taking very important steps towards ensuring that Europe is competitive globally. We've had a lot of discussions with the business community here in Poland, but also in Europe. And I'm very hopeful that after this 6 months, we'll have concrete proposals on the table and that we'll have this perspective of European Union regaining its competitiveness again.
All right. And before I let you go, also a little bit of gossip. We do know that the Hungarian ambassador wasn't invited to the ceremony. Do you think that has more to do with Polish-Hungarian diplomatic spat, or does it have more to do with how Hungary's been acting during its presidency?
Well, I think Hungary has made it pretty clear what it thinks about the political situation here in Poland. And I think that's a reaction to that. I think it would be very difficult for us to accept a representative of the Hungarian government at the gala, given the granting of asylum to Mr. Romanowski.
Right, and also, yeah, perhaps a lot of issues was raised during Hungary's presidency, and maybe we can see Poland taking the role in leadership and kind of bringing back to track.
I think there's a lot of expectation in Europe towards the Polish presidency. We are not aware of that here in Poland. I think we don't appreciate that, but really a lot of people, politicians, experts are looking at us to really deliver, and we are ready to do that.
All right, so exciting 6 months ahead.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.